Kailangan magtutu pag... Another day, another record number of COVID infections. Tonight's big number, 33,169. The country's highest single-day case tally since the pandemic began. Nationwide, more than 46% of those who got tested contracted the virus, but that climbs further to 52% in Metro Manila alone. The country's total caseload is now close to breaching the 3 million mark.
As cases rise, many services are now being crippled, from air travel and railways to government services and media companies. Organizations decide to cut operations due to manpower loss. And some health experts are now calling for a revert to stricter restrictions, but the government says the situation is still manageable based on certain parameters. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Ed Lingao. You're watching The Big Story. Experts and officials are now split on whether to place the country under Alert Level 4 once again, amid the surge in COVID-19 cases.
But for Malacanang, the indicators are not enough just yet for a shift to stricter mobility curbs. Maricel Halili with The Big Story.
From just 400 cases before closing out 2021, to a new record of 33,000 COVID-19 cases on Monday. The question now is, should restrictions revert to the stricter Alert Level 4? For National Task Force Advisor Ted Herbosa, it's a possibility.
Ang maganda naman nung dineklara dito sa NCR ang alert level, nakita ko na sumunod yung ating mga kababayan. Kumonti talaga ang tao sa labas.
Based on Octa's projections, cases have yet to peak by mid-month. But even before that, situation in Metro Manila is becoming more and more critical as hospitals slowly get overwhelmed. Octa suggests a more mobility curbs to control the rapid spread of the virus.
We can slow it down by decreasing capacities in establishments and public transportation. But again, that's a decision of the government.
But acting presidential spokesperson Carlo Nograles goes back to government parameters, such as the 2-week growth rate, average daily attack rate, and the total bed utilization. He says that while cases are undeniably high in NCR, hospital utilization is still considered moderate, making a shift to Alert Level 4 unlikely. Even Metro Manila mayors agree.
Kung titignan mo naman, pinakita nga namin yung mobility on their own, ultimo ang mga tao nagsiself-regulate na. Ultimo sila, hindi na sila lumalabas.
Under Alert Level 4, cinemas won't be allowed to operate, and the seating capacity of all indoor venues like restaurants will be decreased to 10%. Local officials and even private establishments can also impose mandatory wearing of face shields. But for Presidential Advisor on Entrepreneurship Joey Concepcion, limiting the movement of unvaccinated individuals is a better alternative.
Because they are the ones that will overwhelm the hospitals. And when the hospitals are full, then there's no choice.
For now, Alert Level 3 will still be implemented in Metro Manila until January 15. For News 5, Maricel Halili, We Are One News.
As government argues that healthcare utilization is still at manageable levels, let's find out what the situation on the ground really is. Time for the big question with Philippine College of Physicians President Dr. Maricar Limpin. Dr. Limpin, welcome back and thank you for joining us at Big Story.
Yes, good evening everyone.
Doc, how are the hospitals and the doctors faring with the current surge? For example, in Metro Manila, kamusta ngayon?
Mabuti naman pa ang Metro Manila, no? But I have to say that most of the emergency departments are already filled up. And in fact, you have to queue, no, before you can be seen by any healthcare professionals. But as far as admissions in the hospital, we have not really reached the critical level. So kaya hindi pa kami talaga nagsasabi o talagang humihingi ng increase in alert level sa atin, dito sa atin sa Metro Manila.
But I saw the ward beds utilization, it's at 67%. That's, well, obviously it's nearing 70, and 70 is you know, it's some sort of a benchmark or a time to panic.
Yes, you are correct. But many of these are actually at the most moderate. So talagang kaya naming i-handle yan. compared doon sa nakaraang surges wherein many patients were admitted in the ICU. So which will require really very difficult management, no? So medyo mahirap at saka matagal bago makarecover. This napansin namin in a matter of few days, mas nakaka-recover agad ang mga pasyente.
Yes, ma'am. Well, so far, we've been talking about Metro Manila more or less. Pero if you zoom out a bit, when you think about it, Metro Manila is pretty well vaccinated. Mga 90% na tayo of the target. So as it is, and yet we still are the driver of this surge, as it is, we are better off. Pero slowly tumataas din ang numbers sa probinsya, which could be, I suppose, worrisome because their vaccination numbers are not as high as Metro Manila. Number two, their health facilities are not as good, obviously, as Metro Manila. So is there any reason to be concerned there?
Yes, definitely, no? Kasi we know that among unvaccinated individuals, no, whatever variant it may be, no, pag they become infected with COVID, the possibility that they will actually be admitted in the ICU is high. In fact, if you look at the data of the Department of Health, 85%, no, of those admitted in the ICU were mostly unvaccinated. So we really have to speed up, no, the vaccination, particularly in the provinces.
Pero Doc, even if we speed up the vaccination, diba, it takes also some time for the vaccination effects to kick in. And by that time, baka we are over the surge already or we're over the top. Yun lang. I'm just wondering whether we should really be concerned about the provinces. I mean, sabi nga natin na Metro Manila, walang problema, medyo walang problema yan pero yung nakakatakot yung probinsya.
Yes, kaya importante siguro i-restrict natin lang yung mobility ng mga tao dito sa Metro Manila not to go out of the NCR. And then at the same time, yung mga outside of NCR, i-restrict din natin yung movement nila coming here to Metro Manila. Kasi that's the only way na mangyayari na talagang mag-extend, no, yung COVID-19 infection sa mga probinsya.
Okay, that was PCP President Dr. Maricar Limpin. Ma'am, thank you for joining us tonight. As more and more people get infected, especially in Metro Manila, several offices, both private and public, had to cut their operations as their personnel test positive for COVID-19. Cebu Pacific canceled around 20 flights, while Philippine Airlines halts both its international and domestic flights until January 16, as several employees undergo quarantine. Almost 300 employees of the PNR train tested positive for COVID-19, while 55 MRT and 35 LRT employees also contracted the virus. The Supreme Court shifts to a skeleton workforce today due to an alarming number of COVID-19 infections among its personnel. Batasang Pambansa Complex also extended its lockdown by another week, while the Senate building will be closed as several employees have to undergo isolation. And two TV stations are temporarily going off the air. CNN Philippines announced their newscast will only be streamed online, while the A to Z newscast will stop its broadcast until further notice.
These are the other big stories tonight. The testing capacity in NCR draws concerns from experts, saying that once it reaches its limit, we may lose visibility on the COVID situation. Asymptomatic medical staff will still undergo quarantine, clarifies the Philippine General Hospital. This quarantine period for fully vaccinated healthcare workers has been revised. And in case you missed it, this year's Golden Globe Awards just happened, minus the red carpet, the stars, and the actual broadcast. More of these big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Ed Lingao.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. As COVID-19 cases continue to spread, especially in Metro Manila, experts fear the testing capacity in NCR may reach its limit.
With this, some experts recommend the use of home testing kits, but with the guidance of health professionals. Mara Enriquez with the story.
New COVID-19 cases and positivity rates on Monday hit record high anew. In Metro Manila alone, 52% of tests turn out positive. Guido David of Octo Research warns of repercussions once it reaches 60%.
Pag nagkaroon ng surge dito sa NCR, ang nangyayari kasi syempre, since our local borders are not that tight, may mga cases, like residents from NCR mag-travel to other provinces, madadala nila doon.
David said that the situation will get worse if cases go beyond the testing capacity.
Kunyari, 50,000 capacity natin. Umabot na tayo ng 50,000. Then, nag-increase pa siya to 100,000. Hindi natin makikita yung 100,000 yun. We don't know if it's 100,000. We don't know if it's 200,000. We don't know if it's 300,000.
Testing czar Vince Dizon said the country has around 80,000 daily testing capacity, but delays continue to hound the government's COVID-19 monitoring.
Kaya humihingi po tayo ng pasensya sa ating mga kayan. Marami po sa ating mga technician, mga medtech, mga laboratory technician ay nagpo-positibo din po.
That's why some experts are recommending the use of antigen tests at home. Dr. Ronjin Solante said these are cheaper and faster alternative to RT-PCR.
We need to have a close coordination with the healthcare professional para lang we should be guided on how to use it and what to do after being tested.
But if one is already experiencing symptoms, there's no need to wait for test results. Solante said it's better to isolate immediately to avoid infecting others. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
With the increased demand for common drugs over the past week, the Trade Department expects supply to normalize by the weekend. Undersecretary Ana Claire Cabochan says pharmacies and drugstores are expecting supplies to be delivered in the coming days. She says the current stockout is temporary as some manufacturers have the capacity to produce millions of supplies in a month.
One of our local manufacturers has the capacity to produce almost 60 million tablets a month. Kaya po, alam natin na nagkakaroon lang po yun ng temporary stockout dahil naman po yung demand ay medyo mataas talaga nung towards the end of December.
The Philippine General Hospital says all COVID-positive healthcare workers will still have to undergo quarantine, whether or not they have symptoms. PGH spokesman Dr. Jonas De Rosario clarifies that healthcare workers with COVID-19 need to quarantine for 10 days, including those who are asymptomatic cases. The PGA clarifies that only those who had exposure or close contacts but are asymptomatic will be required to still report to work.
For the big story in sports, after about a week of contemplating, pole vaulter E.J. Obiena has decided to undergo surgery for a minor meniscal tear on his left knee. Obiena's advisor, Jim Lafferty, said he left it up to the pole vaulter to decide whether to undergo the procedure or not. One of the concerns, however, was the lack of funding, especially since Obiena hasn't received any financial assistance from the PSC or PATAFA since August of last year. Obiena is scheduled to return to action at the INIT indoor meeting in Karlsruhe, Germany on January 28th. But his participation will depend on the progress of the arthroscopic surgery and rehabilitation. Meanwhile, in tennis, world number 1 Novak Djokovic has been released from immigration detention after the Australian court revoked his visa cancellation. Judge Anthony Kelly ruled the federal government's decision to revoke the tennis star's visa to enter the country as unreasonable and ordered Djokovic's release. The ruling now rekindles Djokovic's hope of winning a record-breaking 21st Grand Slam title. The court, however, was told Australia's immigration minister has reserved the right to exercise ministerial power to revoke Djokovic's visa. Time for another quick break. When we return, checkpoints have been put up in Metro Manila borders to limit the movement of the unvaccinated. Traffic has also improved since cases spiked. Deltacron or Telmicron? A scientist in Cyprus says there is a new strain with the combined characteristics of the Delta and the Omicron variant. And after a tumultuous year, the Hollywood foreign press opted for a glamourless Golden Globes. These big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Edlin Gao.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. Police have put up checkpoints in some entry and exit points around NCR to limit the movement of the unvaccinated.
One obvious change, though, since cases surged, is the lighter traffic in Metro Manila. Mon Gualvez with the rest of the report.
As COVID cases rise in Metro Manila, police personnel become more and more visible. In a bid to ensure mobility restrictions are followed, checkpoints have been positioned in some entry and exit points in NCR, including the Batasan-San Mateo border in Quezon City. Even before dawn, they have been checking on the vaccination cards of those wanting to enter NCR.
Approve ako dun, sir, kasi para ligtas tayo. Ligtas tayong lahat.
Even capacity inside public utility vehicles were being monitored.
Mababawas mo. Bawas ka.
This went on even after lunch. Another jeepney was flagged down for going past the 70% seating capacity. Some passengers had no choice but to get off the vehicle.
Bawas lang po. Aware ka naman doon, sir, sa naging sita. Opo, sir, pasensya na po. Ang hirap po kasi ng biyahe ngayon, sir.
Dapat, pag hinigpitan po ng matagal. Luluwagan po, kasi higpitan. Ay kung higpitan po ng matagal, para mawala na yung virus talaga. Wala din kwenta, higpitan nila ngayon, sa isang linggo po luwagan.
Aside from the alert level 3 in Metro Manila, the Quezon City government has passed a no vaccine, no labas policy, limiting the entry of the unvaccinated individuals.
Merkulis pa po ang nakaschedule sa amin.
Hindi na kayo makakalabas, ha?
Papunta po kayo saan?
Pauwi na ang bata natin. Mabukin nga po dapat po kami. Kaso po pinabalik po kami kasi cut off na daw po.
Naniniwasan lang po natin yung pag po kasi wala po kayong mga bakuna. Madali po kayong makawa.
Security personnel continue to remind motorists to prepare their vaccination cards ahead of time to avoid any delay in case they pass a border checkpoint. While traffic slows in checkpoints like this, movement in majority of Metro Manila roads has been light since the surge started. If before, travel speed along EDSA was only at 20 kilometers per hour, it has now gone up to 37 kph. This, according to the Metro Manila Development Authority, is a sign that NCR residents are now self-regulating their movement. For News 5, Mon Gualvez, we are One News.
For those who got infected with COVID-19, the first few days after symptoms appear can be quite confusing as the infection has a lot in common with the regular flu. But like what mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro experienced, it's always better to assume that you already have the virus. A look at his first few days with COVID-19 in this report.
Had a blast on New Year's Eve. Medianoche with the family, fireworks, screaming at the top of our lungs. But on the first day of the year, I already had mild fever and a sore throat. Like most people who get these flu-like symptoms, I hope that it was just a seasonal flu. You want to tell yourself that it's nothing, that it's just the usual bug. But at the back of your head, you wonder if you finally caught the dreaded COVID-19. It really is difficult to distinguish between COVID and the flu because they generally present the same symptoms. So right now I just woke up feeling like death warmed up. The symptoms that I have are colds, runny nose, coughs, obviously, some occasional body aches, headaches, and I did have a fever the first day, a couple of days ago, the first time the symptoms showed up, then it went away. I took an antigen test and prayed for the best. When the test showed positive for COVID-19, that's when the panic starts to set in. The first thing you do when you do come up positive is warn your close contacts before it's too late. This means warning those all you physically interacted with within 2 meters and for at least 15 minutes. Just warn them that you're positive in an antigen test, but you still have to confirm with a PCR test. Then isolate yourself.
Make sure you isolate yourself. Don't remove that mask. Find a room that you can isolate yourself. Inform your family members kaagad na you're not feeling well.
The health department said antigen test is most accurate when you already have the symptoms, and if it turned positive, the result is usually reliable. Authorities recommend you inform your barangay as soon as you present symptoms, even if you haven't been tested yet. Dr. Eric Tayag, director of the health department, said you should contact your barangay or call the DOH hotline 1555. That's just to give them a heads up, so they're not taken by surprise. It's just a way to let your community know that you're watching out for them, and hopefully they're also watching out for you. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro, we are One News.
So many global developments in the global COVID situation. For one, a strain with characteristics of Delta and Omicron is now being studied. Deltacron, that's what they call it, was initially flagged by a scientist in Cyprus, but some scientists speculate that the findings are a result of a laboratory contamination. The Department of Health says Deltacron is neither a variant of concern nor interest, citing WHO, and that the reported strain has not yet been detected in the Philippines. Israel will roll out 3 free COVID-19 test kits for school kids and their teachers. This as the country reopened amid the Omicron surge in the country. The Israeli government has earmarked PCR and institutional antigen testing for those at high risk or high COVID-19 risk, while home testing has been allowed for the less vulnerable.
No red carpets, no stars, no televised broadcast. The 2022 Golden Globes went down behind closed doors on Sunday after a year of controversies surrounding diversity and immoral practices. The Hollywood foreign press opted to tone down with the ceremony. Winners were just announced real time on Twitter. Acclaimed Netflix drama The Power of Dog wins big with 3 awards, including Best Drama and Best Director. Steven Spielberg's remake of West Side Story, meanwhile, dominated the musical categories, bagging Best Picture, Best Actress, and Best Supporting Actress. For television, Oh Young-soo, who is known as Oh Il-nam from the worldwide hit series Squid Game, won Best Supporting Actor. He is the first Korean actor in Golden Globes history. Another first is post-star Micaela J. Rodriguez, or MJ Rodriguez, who is the first transgender actress to win a Golden Globe. Catch the full list of winners at theGoldenGlobes.com. For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
4 weeks since its debut abroad, Spider-Man No Way Home has finally made its way to the Philippine theaters.
With the country having plenty of Spider-Man fans, it was no surprise to see many come to watch the film dressed as the superhero. Now, despite the delay and the shift to Alert Level 3, many fans flocked to the cinemas in their Spidey masks. Some even dressed up in different versions of Spider-Man. Even our very Pinoy Spider-Man showed up, gagamboy. Nako, partner, kagabi, pinagkakwentuhan namin yan ng kaibigan ko, yung Spider-Man. Sabi niya, meron daw Pinoy dyan. May Pinoy flavor, Pinoy pride. Aabangan natin. Ayoko na i-spoil eh.
Hindi ba yung,
Baka ma-spoil ko,
hindi ba yung sidekick niya is Pinoy?
Yun.
Or that was the
Tapos,
previous, was that the previous movie?
yes. Tapos may maririnig tayong very Pinoy doon. So, I can't wait to watch that. But, you know, while we were talking about Spider-Man last night, ay nakakatawa lang kasi kanina lang pagising ko na naginip ako na may gagamba dito sa chest ko. Naalala ko lang sakto. And then I woke up and then wala. Panaginip lang pala yun. Wala palang gagamba sa katawan ko.
Baka ano yan, bubble fatigue yan.
Oo, yun na nga, yun na nga. Kaya nga,
ingat ka lang dyan.
paalala lang sa ating mga kasama, to everybody who is working from home and who are on lockdown, who have COVID. Let's be careful with the information that we spread around. Maraming pong fake news na kumakalat. So let's distinguish between what is real and what is virtual and what is a dream.
Yeah, and most of all, stay negative but be positive, sabi nga ni Joby Francisco.
That's right. That wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. On behalf of Robbie Lampay, I'm Ed Lingao.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. We are One News. Have a good evening.